In a special discussion with GroupM's Prashant, Kumar and Tushar Vyas at the 13th edition of Impact India Mumbai 2024 by MMA, we delved into AI and discussed how they integrate it into their workflow at the media investment company. We also touched upon how it can be a part of the marketing toolkit and how it can seamlessly improve your marketing strategy as a brand manager or marketer. Just before the panel discussion, when I caught up with Tushar and PK, I was discussing how, like a chairman of a big tech company I had the privilege of interviewing like a couple of months ago last year, said that AI will change, how we interact with our devices in many ways. And one of the ways is that our interaction with our devices and with technology will shift from search to ask. And it has been only like a couple of months since that conversation has happened, and it's already that I'm doing it on my devices that I interact with. So how is it impacting our business, the advertising and marketing business? So we are discussing that. What is the kind of maturity level in terms of adoption of AI and understanding the technology is, what we are going to discuss today. So let's begin this conversation with you, PK. You meet clients and marketers from different sectors. What are some of the conversations that you're having with these clients and marketers? What are they asking you about, AI and usage of AI in marketing?
I think 2-3 areas. I think a lot of questions are on the aspect of, how do you use it? Where does it help, right? Whether it's in the area of effectiveness or whether it's in the area of how do we do it, right? In the context of the data and tech and architecture, how do we get ready with that? And what are some of the, aspects that we're able to, also demonstrate in terms of getting ready for that. A lot of curiosity. If you have a CFO in the room, the question comes is, so what is it at? What is the cost of it? Or it can even mean that, okay, therefore, what business incremental can you get, right? So it's got various questions on this. But I must say that this subject is anyway been spoken in, we also spoke about that earlier, that spoken in multiple forms and multiple forums. But I think the progress is happening, and we see many clients opening up to not just experiment, it's a journey, and therefore really invest their time to look into it, so we can see that happening. There are also clients who are really looking at focusing by putting a task team to really crack it. Because I think there is a belief that while technology is something which is enhancing most of the aspects of marketing, and there's a belief that being AI ready gives you a competitive advantage, right? We can see that in many clients. And we see that when the belief happens, a lot more effort and a lot more focus on how to shape it up, happens.
Are there any watch-outs that they are concerned about as well? Since I'm speaking to you about how our clients are reacting to this technology.
Yeah, see, so the concerns are mainly on, the usage of it and, the boundaries of usage of it. So governance, compliance, becomes extremely critical because it's a tool, it's a way of working, and, it should also not something that, it's a constant improvisation model which needs a lot more attention, right? So mainly that is one concern. And, how to, ensure that each of these readiness actually happens on time, and how, people can be ready for it. So even from a skilling perspective, right? So these are concerns which will be there across any practice.
Anything new that comes up for that matter.
Yeah, anything new that comes. So we see that these are all aspects of how you're really wanting to use that.
Sure.
And people have progressed on that, some of the examples. Uh, and we see that progressive as an industry itself.
Sure, sure. Over to you, Tushar. I was, reading up on one particular survey that GroupM had done, and that survey said, and very interesting stat. This really caught my eye. 70% of the marketers or your clients, I'm talking about a global survey that GroupM had come up with, are interested about AI, are curious about the technology, but only 4% feel confident that they have the right skills to apply it in in their strategies. So what do you have to say on that? And at this point, then what role does an entity like GroupM play, like in hand holding these clients to be more confident about AI going forward?
Yeah, I guess that's where the partnership like us will come in play. And I'm going to talk about a broader WP level. And also, let me give an example of WP in terms of what we are doing to us and in turn, basically what we are helping to client achieve their goals, right? And since we are talking about a maturity model, it's good to talk about the pillars in terms of how we are looking at it, right? So our starting point is what we are calling is the Intelligent Marketing OS operating system, WP Open. And today more than 35,000 people use across WP, right? So that's a sort of at scale implementation of AI capability and how it gets integrated into sort of day-to-day working of our sort of thousands of people and delivering services to client, right? So that becomes a one key pillar for us. Then sort of productizing some of these, and there are a few areas which we are developing our own layer, be it in terms of what we're calling brains, which is supporting brand, which is supporting audience, channel selection, or any of the optimization kind of thing, right? So that's a sort of our own proprietary layer which is sitting on top of that. There's a right amount of data you need to connect, data from ecosystem, data from clients, so that becomes another pillar in terms of how to work with the ecosystem, how you are creating a right ecosystem, quality ecosystem. So it generates something which is enterprise grade and not necessarily a sort of amateurish. The fourth is, and PK touch upon, it's many people's concern, right? How do you train sort of a whole lot of people? So what we have done is we created a future readiness academy. So that's sort of available to all our employees in terms of learning AI in a sort of day-to-day implementation, right? So how do we, in a way, it's like raising a floor kind of thing. How do we get at a scale? And there are people also getting trained into specialized skills also. So we run a program with Side School of Business, and also it's a leadership to all the level, implementation level. There is a sort of training initiative which is running. And finally, partnership, and some of this sort of you also mentioned. So we have been working with NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, all these big guys in sort of building something which is for the industry, for our set of client. And again, there is a spectrum, right? So there are also foundational model, but there are also a lot of startup activity within happening. So we are working across all spectrum to drive this. So these are like 5 pillars which we are building to, in a way, transform our business as well as help our clients.
And on that note, since you mentioned partnerships, WPP did a partnership with Google Cloud. Last year, they announced a partnership with NVIDIA at Computex around same time last year. So how has that helped you deploy AI faster within the organization?
Yeah. And again, some of this partnership has been sort of running for many years, right? So in a way, you can say WP has been active for more than sort of 2017 onward in this space. So there's a lot of work which has gone in the sort of AI stack. NVIDIA specifically in terms of content generation at a scale, right? And again, what I mentioned is enterprise-grade content generation at a scale. So that's the work happening. And we started lending multiple projects for a client in that domain.
In the past, within agencies, we know that there used to be a chief technology officer, but of late, and WPP does have a chief AI officer. On that note, PK, I want to ask you, on an everyday basis, how has generative AI transformed traditional workflows within GroupM?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll probably start with the way you asked the question, right? I feel it's not anymore having only one chief technology officer. I think in today's life, it's quite an exciting landscape, highly evolving landscape. Many more solutions, many more factors to be considered, and quite challenging and, as I said, very exciting as well. So the angle of technology is something which everybody, I mean, in our personal life, I mean, you started with that, right? Devices and stuff. In our professional life, I think the angle of technology adds in a lot more excitement to learn better, to apply it faster, right? All of that comes in. And when you look at from our perspective, I think, as Tushar mentioned, this journey has been there for quite a long time. And we can see that, when we look at from an aspect of deployment of media, right? How Copilot, which is one of our tools, actually helps us from the context of, with more precision of reaching consumers appropriately, right? So, learning about the consumer, insights on that, deploying it and targeting them, using AI to that is what one aspect happens. So, that's something which we actively use it in every single campaign. That allows us to be more precise on targeting audiences. So the time is spent on more studying the audience and therefore deploying it and targeting them, right? So that's one way to, the turnaround time become faster. It can be real time. It can be also better insights. So all of it comes on, and that's the utility we see from Copilot as such. The second aspect, I think Tushar touched about that, which is about customizing content, right? And again, from a cohort basis, today you can have, you're not restricted to have only limited content, right? And again, insights on consumer, insights on communication, how cohorts behave, and therefore coming out with multiple content and targeting those content into multiple cohorts. All of that, again, the technology helps, right? Again, some of it are co-created, some of it are through partners, but we see that evolution happening as we speak. The third element is, we have these triple projects which we do to understand deployment of media spends into multiple media and the effectiveness of that for each advertiser, right? So we do that. But at the same time, collection of data, insights helps us to make those projects, a much more enhanced. And that helps us, in big way to look at large portfolio and specific categories to address some answers on that. And I think from the question, I think it's also important about helping the readiness, not and constantly improvisation. So when it comes to talent, I think Tushar touched upon that. When it comes to readiness from our own clients' basis, right? Data architecture readiness, or technology readiness. So we spend a lot amount of time on that because it's equally important to, before we start appreciating and start claiming that things are working, I think the readiness aspect has to be mutually done, because all of this is done to understand the consumer better, to reach the consumer better, and therefore outcomes are better for what you spend.
What is the biggest challenge that AI has solved for at GroupM according to you? I mean, look at this year, 2024. For example, there is elections, there is going to be there is IPL, there is going to be a T20 World Cup which is on. Busy times for media investment company like GroupM. So how is it solving any of the challenges there?
Yeah, so it's a journey. I think there are three areas. I think a lot of this, which I spoke about earlier in terms of the tool, etc., helps us having an appropriate way of continuous learning and deployment, right? I think in our campaign management, it has helped us a lot. I mean, we have seen, especially post-pandemic, how digital spends have been skewing, a lot more factors and variables coming into it. They're all data which is available. And it's only appropriate that these data are put into practice of learning and application of that, which is what I think at GroupM we've extensively practiced that. We've got a We've got a team at Nexus, which is on ensuring expertise across platforms, multi-platforms, cross-channel optimization, etc., where all of this technology are used. And we continuously, developing that. That's one area. I think the other area is in our consulting practices, how we have tried to look at some of the learning, including the content and insights, right? So these are clearly areas which have come up. I also sense, it's not about only efficiency. I know this question may lead to that, right? Has GroupM been able to create efficiency? I think efficiency in time, definitely, right? So people are able to think better. People are able to look at multiple other areas. I mean, it's not anymore a very linear 5 media, plans, right? There are multiple factors coming. So people are able to spend time on that, take learning on that, cross apply onto multiple others. So all of that, I think, brings in a lot more ability to do better, what you're doing today from a tomorrow's aspect. So all of that has been very useful.
Speaking of efficiency, and I was going to come to you, Tushar. Speaking of efficiency, even the marketers and the clients know that AI is like an efficient tool. Dedicate. It will help you get that efficiency out of like your investment. Are there any pressures from the client side to probably like for faster outcomes or for cost reductions? At all?
Yeah, can I build on what the speaker said before I move to the point you asked, right? And sort of broadly, I want to put in terms of where it is helping in 3 buckets. So one is, in terms of imagination. And I want like to call out some of the example, right? For example, what work Mondelez has done or what Coke has done in terms of, there's a new way of engaging consumer where the AI is playing an integral part of the communication, right? So it's creating a newer touch point, which in a pre-AI era was not possible, and driving that level of personalization, that level of empathy connect. So that's a sort of one big bucket which we are looking at. Second bucket is in terms of, assistant augmentation. I'm just broadly putting it, right? In terms of how do we help our, people or workforce do work more efficiently and work better, right? In terms of inspiration, assisting, and day-to-day work and stuff like that. So that's a sort of broadly a second bucket, and that's where your efficiency story comes into play. And the third bucket is basically, I would say, broadly into optimization. So there are certain tasks which was not humanly possible. And that's where, media, for example, many examples comes into play. You are doing a multiple iteration, be it in terms of solving a problem which is a complex, right? So right point, right message. So dynamic content optimization, or looking at hundreds of cohort and customizing your content. So again, these are some of the problem which was partly unsolved or maybe not fully solved, and that's the third bucket which AI is coming into, right? So it's a sum total. It's a new way of looking at things, as well as the the how better we sort of execute and perform what we have been doing. So it's a mix of both. And your efficiency story is just a part of that, right? It's not a full story. And that's a point I just also wanted to make here.
Yeah, so I'll just add on. We're not definitely escaping the question of are there pressures, right? See, I think today is a world where, in a way, high growth, low cost is the formula, right? And pressures are there across every, right? And that's also because of the context of, where do you find the source of growth, where can you improvise, etc. and on. And we believe that technology has the ability to make things even, improvised in an improvised manner and effective manner. Now you call it efficiency, you call it effective. I think it's value, right? And it gives, so everybody wants a better value. Everybody wants to maximize value. I think the power of technology is really helping to build on that, right? And now you're able to finish a job faster, which means you have time and to think about how do I improve the quality, right? You're able to, do a job with, let's say, instead of 10 people, probably 8 people, the other 2 focus on something else, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And ours is an ecosystem where every day we have something new happening. Every day there is something new happening. And definitely, therefore, our ability to, focus on how do I learn continuously and how do I pick it up and use it for my next campaign. It's a continuous journey. So we see that while the pressures may be there for everyone, I think it's a good conversation to have. And sometimes it happens that investment comes first and maybe the outcomes is a derivative, right? And in most of the cases, that's why I said the CFO point, that what's the cost of it? So you got to invest first, right? And you have to get things ready. And after that, yeah, it can be even more better, from what you are today. So I think these conversations are, really useful. I don't think it's in a very specific, only one-sided manner. I think there's the interest because we see this subject of AI not just playing into marketing. We see this subject playing in logistics, medical industry, BFSI industry, right? And we as an individual is part of the journey, even when you want to keep your profession aside, right, on a day-to-day life. So we see and we believe that this is something which is going to useful to us and very meaningful to us, right? So that's what it is.
So, since you mentioned it's a journey and the space is ever evolving. Having said that, what are some of the things that marketers should keep in mind to stay ahead in this journey?
Yeah, I said earlier, I believe that, a marketer who probably is a continuous technology applicant, who applies it, as well as ready to experiment and take faster learning and also be AI ready is going to be having a very high competitive advantage in the years to come. So first point is that. I think definitely it'll add to the edge to any marketer, right? I think clients, they're quite conscious about the space and the subject. So ability to imbibe the culture of how we want to do it. A lot of it goes from the data strategy, right? Because if there is no data and there is no insights, right? So how are we able to manage that? Now I'm coming into the ground usage of this, right? So you need data for their own data. You need to be open to look at learning from multiple other cohorts of data, which are all possible, in today's life. A lot of tech architecture, focus on that. How can I get ready on that, right? I think a lot of it comes from their ability to formulate the task team, including the governance and compliance team, to look at some of the areas of what are the do's and don'ts, and continuously be at it, right? A lot of effort on skilling the people, right, so that the dialogue can be on. So therefore, that is a very important point. Both of us have been speaking on that. It's not just for us, it's also from the marketer's side. And ability to appreciate that and learn it and then relearn it and use it, right? So I think all of this comes together as a package for a client.
So uncertainty is the only constant in the advertising and marketing, and you should have or you should dare to experiment with this AI going forward. Thank you so much. Thank you, PK. Thanks, Tushar. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shivani.
Thank you.